Today, my friends, we are going to learn about Ficus elastica, otherwise known as the rubber tree, right here. This is probably one of the most common indoor plants around the world. It's super beautiful. It is native to India, China, Malaysia, places like that. And a lot to say about this plant. One thing you say is that it has beautiful evergreen leaves that are just so lustrous and lush looking. And the leaves as the tree gets bigger, the leaves get smaller. And then when the tree is younger and leaves born in the shade are much larger. Look how big that thing is. Isn't that gorgeous? And you can see all the inner foliage is much wider than the top foliage. So this is in the group of fig trees in the ficus group of plants. I'm down here in Mexico. This is my buddy's surf village here in central Pacific Coast, Mexico. And you can see he inherited this situation. They planted a rubber tree right in the middle of their circular driveway. And they did it really well. I mean, what a feature plant to have here. He lets it grow down really low. He likes all this low hanging foliage, which I think is really fun. It does sort of rub the car as it rolls in the surfboards. Doesn't seem to bother him. But as you can see, there's not a lot of head clearance. It's kind of fun. It's like the plant dominates the space. The person who did this had some really good foresight because this tree can get really aggressive and have some really aggressive roots that can displace things. So they did two things here to allow for that. They put in a really structural poured concrete wall, which is extremely strong, all reinforced with rebar, I'm sure. And not only that, but they gave it lots of space. So that's what you want to do with a plant like this, because someday this plant could consume this whole entire planter. It'll just keep growing wider and wider and wider. And you can see what it does. It makes all of these aerial and buttress roots. Here's an aerial root. Hasn't quite gotten to it's gotten to the ground, but hasn't walked into the ground yet. But this rainy season, it'll probably stay so wet that it will anchor itself in here and then further prop itself up. So a lot of these tropical countries, they have a lot of hurricanes that run through and things can get crazy. So what better to do than to stabilize yourself than make these big, giant buttress aerial roots. And you can see some of them start pretty high up. In fact, these aerial roots in India are often used from this very same species. They are used to build bridges across rivers. And they will weave all of these roots. They'll take these things and they'll just pull them in a direction from a tree from one side of the river. And then the other side of the river, they'll pull another one. They'll tie them together. And they'll just keep doing that. And eventually, they've got themselves a structural bridge. Just like right here. See this? See how strong that is? Eventually, it starts out really pliable. But eventually, it strengthens up. And you can't move it. It's very structural. So that's a really fun thing. Look up the rubber tree bridges of India. It'll blow your mind. There's also all kinds of cultivars of this plant. It was introduced into Europe in 1815 as a houseplant. And what a successful story that was. Not only do you have the green version, but you also have like a red version, you have a bronze version, and you have variegated versions. So there's all kinds of different cultivars of this plant that have been asexually propagated over time. And with the leaves, you'll see that they're covered, if we can find one, maybe nearing its completion. They're covered with a sheath, each one of them. And it's really interesting on how they unfurl, if I can find one. And then they drop their little covering down on the ground, and then the next leaf does the very same thing. I guess you'll just have to trust me on that because I don't really see any that are doing that. But it is the leaf comes right out of here. It's covered up by a sheath that I could probably peel off. There's your sheath. The other thing that's interesting about this plant, watch. Remember, it's the rubber tree. Look at this. See that latex material coming out? The whole tree is full of it. Look at this. It just bleeds this white latex. Now that was actually used for rubber back in the day until they found a better tree from Brazil that made it more efficiently. So even though this tree is called the rubber tree, it's not really commercially used for rubber anymore. There's another tree called heavier. Oh, here we go. Look, here's what it does. The leaf comes out. See, just falls right off, and then the leaf will open up from there. Yeah. So, what else about this tree? It's interesting because it has a relationship with a certain type of wasp, where the wasp relies upon the tree, and the tree relies upon the wasp to fertilize it. And I don't think in this country that wasp is here, because there are no fruits on this tree whatsoever. And you would see it naturalizing if there were, because it would make the seeds viable once the wasp pollinated them. But that's what it's required in order to grow this tree on its own and self-germinate it. So in the absence of the wasp, you must take cuttings, big cuttings, put them in the greenhouse, get them to go that way. Now, what's cool is even though we're down here in Mexico, this tree will do fine in the Bay Area. In most areas, you'll see some really big ones around the San Francisco Bay Area if you know what to look for. They're out there, and they're getting bigger every year. I've seen 30-foot tall trees. This tree in its native habitat can get almost 200 feet tall, and who knows how wide. It could probably get infinitely wide because it has the buttress rooting nature to it. And all it needs to do is come out here, and look at this. Look at those things. I kind of disrupted the process. Look, those were actually landing. Look, they were landing in the leaf mulch of the tree, and they were going to root and get a big giant buttress. I'm going to put it back, get a good start underneath all this mulch. So my buddy Scott, he just picks up all the leaves from the property and throws them in here, and you see this beautiful tapestry. There's no plants in here, just coconuts and leaves, and it just feeds the plant. This is a really good thing to do for pretty much any plant, because as they decompose, look at this wonderful material that it makes. I mean, the native soil doesn't look that rich. If you dig down, look, the soil is not so nice. On the top, it's beautiful because it's been decomposing for so long. You dig down, you get down to the native dirt, totally different color. See that? And the only reason that the top part is such a beautiful dark color is because of all this decomposing material, all these little bugs. That's a little scorpion right there. Anyway, so that's a really good way to treat your trees. And it's probably cold hardy down to probably 25 degrees. It gets more cold hardy with time. I'll stand back. It's kind of a funny, sunny, overcasty day, so I'm not sure if you're really going to get the full effect of this plant, but it makes for such a wonderful entry here. And down in Mexico, this is a really dry location. I mean, look at the dry grass. It's a dry season for like 7 months of the year. Eventually it does rain. You have a rainy season coming up, but in the wintertime it's a dry season. And even though it's a dry season, and look, it's so dry that these plants even struggle a little bit here. The parasol or the umbrella trees, but this tree is so established that it doesn't need any water at all. So it's one of those trees that looks really lush and beautiful and doesn't require any water whatsoever once established. And that would be the case in the Bay Area. You could plant this tree, water it for 3 or 4 or 5 years and get it going, and then take away all the water, and you still have this beautiful evergreen look to make you feel like you're super lush without having to expend all of that water on the plants. This tree is often not sold as an exterior tree. Most people get this tree in the Bay Area as an interior tree. It gets too big on them, and then they move it outside. And that's why you see a lot of outdoor ficus trees. Now, we have lots of different ficus we can grow in the Bay Area. This is just one of them, but it's a pretty fantastic plant. And so that's pretty much it. It's Ficus elastica, native to India, Malaysia, China, all the tropical regions. And definitely look up those Indian bridges across the rivers using Ficus elastica. You're going to trip out when you see that. Have a great day.